Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm gonna go over a bunch of questions that you guys had around home decor and design. First question asked by Amber DeCoff, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, is how big of a rug should I get for my baby nursery? Really depends on the size of the room and the pieces that you have in the space. The general rule is that you want all front legs of the furniture on the rug, especially with a crib, so you want the front two legs on it. If any accent chairs, etc., like the front two legs, or obviously, the front of the base if it's a platform. For the most part, you want it to take up a majority of the space, leaving at least, I'd say, 10 to 12 inches or so of edges around the room. Eden Reshef, maybe I should stop saying these usernames because I might end up botching all these, but how do you utilize negative space well and how much is too much decor? As someone who is very much a minimalist when it comes to decor, I like my surface areas, like the functional areas, to be totally clear. It's like dressers, a statement piece here and there, or like a dining table, one centerpiece or one piece on a console table, for me is totally fine, because there's still a lot of surface area available. It's visually clean. In terms of wall space, you want to find the focal point in your space first. First thing that you see upon entering a room. That should be what draws your attention and holds your attention above all else. Find that focal point in your space, whatever wall that may be, and then everything else from that should be secondary. So let's say your room is pretty massive. You've determined your focal point, then you still have a opposing wall that's totally blank. You could totally put art on it, but maybe diversify it, right? So if you have your focal point is a really pretty painting, or perhaps, it's a rock wall you've designed. Opposite wall could have a mirror. So in that way, you are basically accentuating your focal point and it's visible from more angles. Typically in a space, no more than 2 walls, and making sure that your art is to scale will also make a big impact. The smaller the art, the more it's gonna feel like it's naked and it needs a little something. I have videos on this too if that's helpful. What's your recommendation for mixing patterns in a room? Every pattern typically has its own style, right? You can go for like a bohemian or a desert/western style, making sure that you're adhering to that style. But what if it's like plain, polka dots and stripes? Typically, one will have more of a focal point than the other, so you want to prioritize that. If you have a pattern that's really bold, try to get a little bit more subtle with your secondary patterns in the space. And don't go too crazy unless your style is eclectic, where you absolutely love to mix all the different styles. And you want to make sure that it's cohesive by incorporating the color palette, or at least something that will remain consistent across all of the different patterns. For instance, color scheme might stay the same, perhaps it's the fabric or the material you're looking at, but then varying the pattern. Shut Up Christine asks, what are all the colors you used on your walls? Exact name, brand, and finish, please. For all of my walls, I typically use flat paint. I bounce between Sherwin-Williams and Benjamin Moore. The color behind me right now is November Rain by Benjamin Moore in flat. I do flat walls because I like it to have that very matte looking finish. With that being said, there is the option of doing matte. Flat walls are great, especially if you're someone who loves lighting like I do, because you don't get that reflection from light. However, it is harder to clean because it is flat, so if you smudge the wall, you'll be able to see it. Dirt is more apparent. But touching it up makes it easier because you can, just touch up a small little patch of paint and then you won't be able to tell where you patched it up. There's another option, which is matte, which is a little bit shinier, but it's still very much matte. Easier to clean than flat. I have used it in some areas of my house and it's really hard to tell the difference, but there's a bit more of a sheen to it. For my baseboards, for woodwork, anything like that, trim, crown molding, etc., I use satin. Easier to wipe down, easier to clean. Darker paints that you've seen in my house, ceiling for instance, I've used black, which is Benjamin Moore black. I've also used this like an olive green undertone black, which is Sherwin-Williams and iron. And then if you go to my fireplace, I have Best Bronze by Sherwin-Williams. It's like this brown, goldy almost undertones. Very, very pretty. And then original colors in my house was actually selected by the builders. That's gonna be Wind's Breath by Behr. It's supposed to be like a white, but it's actually got blue undertones, like almost blue-green undertones. Really cute in a nursery. Just wasn't for me. I wanted something a little bit warmer. Totally forgot to give you my ceiling paint, but this is Urban Jungle by Sherwin-Williams. Alice asks, what's a project you thought was going to be super difficult but turned out to be really easy? 100% the rock wall leading up to the roof. I used muscle bound for that instead of using a mortar for attaching the tile, so it was super easy. In my head, I thought that, tiling a wall was gonna be this uphill Herculean battle, but in reality, I think because I used the muscle bound, it's peel and stick, it made it a lot easier. With that being said, it is permanent. It's not rental friendly just because it is peel and stick. Impress Beauty Official asks, which wall in the living room should be painted? The one you see right away or the opposite? So typically the one you see right away is going to be your focal point. It's going to be what draws your attention to the room so that you can make your way around the space. In design, this theory or this principle is actually called emphasis / creating a focal point. You want to make sure it's that first wall. Again, if it's the opposing wall that you also want to, get a little spicy with, perhaps incorporating a mirror to bounce that focal point, whatever it is that you decide to create, so that you can see it from multiple areas. Jacqueline asks, what do you use for lighting behind your TV? I actually have a Instagram highlight called Lighting, where I explain all of the lighting in my house. There's just a lot that goes into the lighting in my house, between using Philips Hue and the pieces that you need to get it all to work together. I definitely advise checking it out just so you can kind of, see the visual, but also get a bit of an understanding of how things are working in the background. I really invite you to check that highlight because it's going to explain it a little bit better. Rubabs asks, how to style kitchen countertops? As someone who's very much minimalist in terms of decorative objects and figurines in the house, I like to keep my kitchen pretty clear. I don't have enough cabinet space that I can keep my knives and all of my utensils stored away, but in my dream home that would not even be out. If your kitchen is really large, perhaps a large vase with statement branches, statement leaves could be something that's very, very pretty without overcrowding the area, especially in a kitchen. You want it to be functional so that when it does come time to use a kitchen, everything's pretty clear and it's easy, accessible for you to use. I personally find that when you start to put too much in a home, not only does it drive you anxiety after the fact because you're gonna end up with all of this unnecessary decorative objects, just things, right? Things that just collect dust. Design needs to be purposeful. Everything should be functional at home. Of course, there are some things here and there that deserve our attention. Perhaps it's just statement pieces, art in of itself, but to fill up a house just to fill it up with decorative objects is almost a waste. I feel it comes off as like an insult to the person that designed the beautiful home, the person who designed all of the beautiful furniture that you incorporate into your house, because it's almost doing them a discredit. Your attention starts to get pulled to all these objects and all these figurines, and next thing you know, you don't even see the actual piece of furniture that it's on. Think of it like one giant art canvas. You want to make sure that you're giving attention to all of the pieces in the room and that nothing is competing visually. Kate asks, dumb question. No, Kate, there's no such thing as dumb questions. Are you an interior designer or a DIY enthusiast? I used to actually work in corporate, and then I started to gain some traction or some followers on social media, and next thing you know, I became a full-time content creator. In the beginning though, I did take on clients as an interior stylist, clients from all over, did virtual consultations, I did projects locally. And then over time, it just didn't work out for me anymore. The opportunity was just a lot better in the influencer world, so I switched over. At the end of the day, my hours are limited, so I really wanted to make sure that I was maximizing my time. And of course, doing what's best for my family too financially. So I've made the shift, but I suppose you could call me a DIY enthusiast now. Ray asks, right size shape rug for an 11 by 11 office. Shape of rug is totally up to you. Square office though, it can be tricky. I'm someone who loves symmetry, so it drives me a little bit wild when there's no symmetry. But you can still create that symmetry in a square room. Perhaps, you have your desk centered in the space, and then you have a piece of furniture on the back wall that kind of creates that rectangular area in the space that's available in the room. In which case you could settle for like a 6x9 with, shelves behind it or cupboards behind it. Say that you don't need the extra storage and you kind of just want to keep it open. You could opt for something a little bit more asymmetrical. You could go for something funky shapes like a wave, etc. Amanda Morris asks, painting a strip behind your TV on vaulted ceiling, is it a good idea style-wise? It can actually be a great idea to help draw the eyes toward the ceiling and accentuate your vaulted ceiling to begin with. Could be really fun. Actually also play with some textures, see what you can do in terms of wallpaper, or perhaps, tiling could be fun as well. You might not have, a fireplace there, but you can create the illusion almost of a fireplace with, playing with tile or peel and stick wallpaper, etc. Playing with textures is really fun and can really accentuate a space. You could also do some paneling, that would also be fun. I would say, the thinner the better. When you start to get too wide with your panels, it can look a little cheap, so just be careful with that. K Font says, OCD near freak spouse. Do you constantly purge your decor or great hiding places or organizer? I don't purge, but when I first moved into this home, actually I do purge. I lied. When I first moved here, I made a pact with myself that I would only give myself one cabinet in this entire house where I could have spillover of decor. Anything else that doesn't have a home, I give away. If it doesn't fit in the cabinet, it's literally not staying in my home. We outgrew our last place way too quickly, so I'm really trying to avoid that this time around. Unnecessary clutter, dust collectors, just trying to avoid that altogether. I've noticed as someone with OCD that my mental state has been so much more relaxed, has been so much better since moving in and kind of, you know, making sure that I'm keeping clutter at bay. Less is more, and it's done wonders for me mentally. I highly recommend buying quality pieces so that you don't feel inclined, you know, next time you're at a Target or a TJ Maxx to buy things because you know that you've already put money towards something really beautiful that has been planned out in your space, so you don't feel the need to go and buy, you know, cheaper alternatives. Once I started planning out my decor and started putting more money toward these pieces, it was almost as if, you know, when I walked into the TJ Maxx or Target, all of those things turned me off because I knew that the things that at my house had already been planned, but I also had dropped, you know, good money on. It's all about planning and making sure that you're being careful. If you don't plan, you tend to buy the cheaper things, the more budget-friendly things, and the next thing you know, it's easy to swap those out because you're like, you know, I bought this vase for $10, but I found this one, it's prettier, it's $20, and you're quick to make the swap versus if you have something that's a little pricier. I already know I'm gonna botch this name, but Schubers. What's with the different wood colors? Do we mix them or not? The key to mixing wood tones is making sure that you're staying within the undertone family. You have warm, cool, and neutral undertones, right? So your warm undertones are going to be your red woods, orange, etc., even yellow. Neutral is obviously going to be, as it's called, neutral. And then your cool is going to be your grays or sometimes like brown with gray undertones, black. Usually tell the undertones of wood by placing a white piece of paper next to it. The undertone should reveal itself usually immediately. If you're not sure, place wood samples next to one another and then you'll quickly see the differences in undertones. To mix wood colors or wood, you want to make sure that's in the same undertones, right? So you could put like a very warm wood with lighter warm wood, same thing with neutrals and same thing with cool. It starts to get a little weird when you start to mix a lot of warm undertones with cool undertones. I find that they tend to clash, so just be very careful. Also, just wanted to pause really quick because I have a ton of questions asking where things are from, where things are in my home. And as a reminder that everything in my home is linked in the link in all of my profiles under Shop My Home, Shop My Post. I'll also post it at the bottom of this video so you guys can access it. Jojo Tete asks, thoughts on open shelving in kitchens rather than upper cabinets, especially for ADHD. I'm someone who has ADHD, OCD, and anxiety, so for me, seeing clutter visually drives me insane. It triggers my anxiety and it's an absolute no. However, if you're someone that has trouble putting things away, if the task just seems arduous to you and that's exactly why all of the clutter ends up everywhere, then open shelving would make that a lot easier for you as it makes the entire task seem less arduous. But if you're someone like me, then closed cabinetry is going to be better because it'll ease your anxiety and make things look visually cleaner. Ed95C asks, how do you keep your entrance tidy, organized, coats, boots, winters, gear dog, etc.? For me, I prefer closed storage. I don't like to see things out of sight, out of mind, and I just prefer the visual cleanliness. So I prefer to have a closet, right? But if you don't have a closet, you can install cabinetry, you can add hooks. In my closet, I've placed little baskets on the doors. I've put little hooks that I can have dog leashes hung up. I can have our jackets, keys, wallets, etc. Elise asks, are wood slats timeless or trendy? Elise, I think wood slats can be very timeless if it goes with the entire design. Design is holistic, so sometimes we see people say that accent walls are going to go out of style, that slat walls are going to go out of style, and that's not the case. It's just when you throw these things in a space where the design isn't cohesive with it, then yes, it's going to go out of style. People get on trends because everyone else starts to do it, but they don't take into consideration the rest of their home, and that's where things start to fall apart. But just make sure it's cohesive with the rest of your home. It's something very contemporary, then it's going to be a perfect fit. It should be ingrained in the architecture of the home too. So perhaps you could remove the baseboard and then install the slats for a more seamless look. I know that you mentioned that it was for closets, but try to create something as seamless as possible. Think about anything that could interrupt the flow of that design and try to get rid of it. If you can't, then I would say scrap the idea of a slat wall and try to do something a little bit more classic or traditional that goes with the style of your home. The Active Lawyer asks how to create light in a dark room. So I actually do the opposite. Especially in a dark room, if there are no windows in that room, then it makes it even harder because you really don't want to play up the fact that you're in a dark windowless room. So I would say make it moody, design it to be moody, and kind of play into that moody feel. If you have windows, but it's so dark and you're just trying to brighten things up, use mirrors to bounce natural light wherever you can, across from a window or next to a window. The larger the mirror, the better, because it'll bounce that natural light and make the rooms feel a lot brighter than it actually is. Another way to brighten up a space is through paint. Eggshell paint will bounce more to light than flat paint because of that reflective aspect of it. Some other things you can do is keep colors very light to keep it nice, bright, and airy. Nulia Vang asks, how do you plan to stay uncluttered with the baby on the way? I already know that this is going to be a complete shift in my life, so making sure that I have tons of storage to accommodate a new roommate. I just bought like a 9-drawer dresser, and I'm gonna keep it empty for as long as I can so that as things start to build up naturally, I can have space to put these things in. Making sure I'm incorporating lots of baskets. I just recently built these little benches that are actually going to have storage underneath in one of the front rooms, so it's gonna be perfect for toys and, you know, things like that. I think the secret is to just plan ahead. Knowing who you are as a person, what behaviors, what things kind of drive you nuts inside of your home, what, you know, has been working for you, and kind of planning around that. So for me, like I said, it drives me nuts when I can see things clutters everywhere. So just planning ahead, making sure that every design that I'm, you know, building or doing in my home, making sure to incorporate a lot of storage is going to be key for me not to outgrow the space within the next 6 months. Nicole De Fusco, sorry if I'm butchering that, asks, just bought a new house. Where do I start first with furnishing and decorating? You want to make sure you are prioritizing what is most important to you, which rooms you use the most in your home throughout the day. Obviously our bedrooms we spend a lot of time in, but even aside from sleeping, like which rooms do you spend the most time in during the day? Is it an office space? Is it the kitchen? Is it dining room, living room, whatever have you? And kind of prioritize that. Select the largest pieces of furniture in each of those rooms and start there. I never say, hey, complete this entire room first before going out to the room, because that's gonna drive you nuts. I don't think that's also feasible or realistic. It's important to go through each room and pick the largest, most foundational pieces of those rooms, and then go back to the things that are a little bit more, you know, aesthetic driven. So rugs, obviously textiles are important, but things that are more like eye candy, decorative pieces, textiles, pillows, lighting, all of these things are important to the design and look and feel of a room. However, at the end of the day, you have to also think about function. Function should come first. You have to be able to actually use these spaces first before you actually start worrying about the little stuff that, you know, are the finishing touches. Make a list, priority list of which rooms you use most use to lowest. In each of those rooms, kind of detail out which pieces are the largest that you definitely need and which pieces you need less of. And then working your way down that list and kind of going from each room until you get through the entire list. Gate Eek asks, are wall paneling accent walls still a trend? Design is holistic, and a lot of people tend to neglect that when, you know, they see trends come and go. For instance, something might be really hot right now and they want to incorporate it into their home because it's really popular. But when you don't think about the design holistically, the architectural style of the home, and that doesn't get incorporated into the decision making, things start to look a little bit haphazard. And that's how you get stuck in a house that is trendy and not timeless. You want to make sure that everything is cohesive, right? The design itself is cohesive. So if you have a traditional home and you start to incorporate contemporary aspects into the architectural style, like let's say paneling, just like one room, it's gonna start to look a little wonky over time. At the same time, you wanna make sure that these things are built into the home. So like I mentioned before, like sometimes a baseboard can completely throw off a slatted wall look. Or perhaps it's the only room in the house with a slatted wall, then it's like, oh, is it really cohesive with the entire space? Making sure that you're creating that rhythm is important, because rhythm is a design principle and it's critical to making the entire space look and feel harmonious. Accent walls, it's not that they're gonna go out of style. I think how people tend to do them is going to go out of style. What is it really tying in with, right, with the rest of the space? Focal points are important. I say this all the time. It's also another design principle. There are ways to achieve it, but you can't forget about the other design principles. There are 6 of them right here. Paula asks, how do you solve decor style disagreements with your partner? I am very fortunate, Paula, to have a husband who is very easy to work with. He always says he picks his battles. He likes all the things that I do to the home. He likes all of my ideas. And at first, sometimes, depending on the idea, if it's a little out there, he might be a little skeptical, but at the end, he's always impressed by it. And I think he just trusts me at this point to make these decisions. But I know that's not the case for every relationship. And so I think even for our relationship, when it's disagreements in other aspects of our relationship, communication is key. So being able to address how you feel. Dave, I feel that this is a good idea because X, Y, and Z. And then at the same time, I want to hear his side. Why does he think it's a bad idea? X, Y, and Z. And trying to find that compromise, that, you know, halfway point. I am by no means a relationship expert, but that's what has worked for us. Hopefully that was helpful. Jackie McGill asks, how to style house in winter, non-holiday. Jackie, I'm actually someone that doesn't really style for the season. Less is more for me, just clutter-wise. I try to keep things as clean as possible to keep my mind at bay. However, if you're someone that does like to decorate seasonally, I would recommend, you know, in the wintertime you can opt for heavier fabrics, so switching out those throw blankets for like wool. You know, you could have fur blankets, whereas in summer you could have lots of linen, lightweight fabrics, polyester, etc. That's a good way to start. And then also like swapping out vase filler. Perhaps you have twigs or branches in the wintertime. Dried branches, dried leaves, and in the summer you have more of the greenery. You could also change your color schemes if you really wanted to. Again, that's just means more purchase for me and just, you know, having to store more items, but it really depends on the person. But you can get seasonal without going too crazy. Keep your foundational pieces constant throughout and then just switching things here and there. Gotta find a neutral color palette that you can easily just swap out a few things rather than trying to swap out an entire space. It'll be a lot more affordable down the road and you won't regret it, a lot less clutter. Branderson asks, what's your dream home layout design and why? I love myself an open concept. Mostly all one floor. I just love how it feels more communal, like everyone is closer together, whereas when you have a home that's multi-level, I feel like people tend to kind of spread out, right? So the kids will be upstairs, each one in their own room, parents downstairs, and it tends to feel a little bit isolated. A one-level floor is great because you can still get that sense of privacy with the separate rooms, obviously, right? But it's all on one floor, so you're still together in a way. I wouldn't mind having like we do now, like one room or a couple of rooms on a different floor. I'm totally okay with that, but for the most part, having a majority of the rooms on the same floor is just... KN Nicholas asks, do you have any decor tips for making any tiny studio apartment look spacious? Yes, I actually have an entire playlist on TikTok for small room tips. It's gonna have a ton of videos for you. It's all about drawing the eyes to the ceiling, making sure that you're selecting, for instance, curtains that are floor to ceiling. It's going to make the space feel a lot larger than it actually is. It basically diminishes human scale, so the smaller you feel, the larger the space will feel. So you really want to select large pieces. Even for artwork, if you're on a budget, you don't have to necessarily find pieces that are $1,000, $2,000 artwork just because of the size. You could DIY, you could thrift. As long as the group or collection of art meets the dimensions, that's fine too. So you could have 6 or 8 art frames to collectively make up the dimensions that you need for it to be to scale. Making sure that your rug is the accurate size, so something too small is going to make the room feel small, and oddly enough, something too large will also, because it'll start to make it look like carpet. Making sure that your furniture is to scale as well. Using open base furniture as much as you can, so a bed with legs versus a bed on the floor versus a platform bed. A dresser that perhaps, you know, has legs, chairs, etc. The more platform furniture that you use, the tighter the space is gonna feel. I save the best for last. It sounds like a lot of you guys lost the link that I mentioned some time ago about a website that you could use, a free tool online to help you design your own spaces. It's called Roomstyler.com. And basically you can go on this website and add the dimensions of your room and play around with different pieces of furniture. And it's free, all free, and it's really fun too. It allows you to plan and see your space before you actually start to buy things. Highly recommend, check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching. That is it for today's Q&A, and I will see you next time.